Ever heard the phrase, "one man's meat is another man's poison"? This old saying perfectly encapsulates the concept of relativism. Now you might be wondering, what exactly is relativism? Well, it's a philosophical idea that suggests there's no absolute truth. Yes, you heard it right, no absolute truth. Instead, it posits that all viewpoints, whether they're about cultural practices, ethical systems, or even scientific theories, are equally valid. Imagine you're looking at a painting. You might see a stunning sunset, while someone else might see a fiery explosion. Both of you are looking at the same thing, but you're interpreting it differently. That's relativism in action. It's a fascinating concept, isn't it? It shakes up our understanding of the world by saying that our perception of right or wrong, true or false, can change depending on our perspective. It's like looking at the world through a kaleidoscope, with every twist revealing a different pattern. Relativism, in essence, is the understanding that what may be right or wrong, true or false, can vary significantly depending on one's perspective. Let's dive into the deep end with a controversial topic: female genital cutting. Now, this isn't an easy subject to broach, but it's an important one in understanding the concept of relativism. Female genital cutting, often abbreviated to FGC, is a cultural practice found in parts of Africa and the Middle East. It involves the removal of all or part of a woman's clitoris and labia, an act that brings about numerous negative health consequences. Yet, despite these known risks, the practice continues unabated in some regions. Why, you might ask? Well, it boils down to deeply rooted cultural beliefs and traditions. You see, many communities that engage in FGC aren't oblivious to the potential health risks. Instead, they believe the social and cultural benefits outweigh these negatives. In these communities, FGC is often seen as a rite of passage, a tradition that marks a girl's transition into womanhood. It's also viewed as a means of preserving purity and enhancing marital prospects. And here's where the concept of relativism really comes into play. The practice of FGC, from an outsider's perspective, might seem barbaric and unnecessary. But for those within these communities, it's an integral part of their identity and societal norms. The perspective one holds can greatly influence their understanding and acceptance of these practices. Interestingly, it's not just men who perpetuate this tradition. Elderly women in these communities often play a pivotal role in its continuation. They're the ones who usually perform the cutting and are staunch advocates for the practice. This case study is a stark reminder of how deeply ingrained cultural practices can be, and how one's perspective can greatly influence their understanding and acceptance of these practices. It also illustrates the complexities of relativism and how it presents a challenge when addressing practices that may be harmful, yet are deeply rooted in cultural identity and tradition. This case study shows us how deeply ingrained cultural practices can be, and how one's perspective can greatly influence their understanding and acceptance of these practices. Now, let's shift our focus to the Middle East, the status of women in Saudi Arabia. This region has often been under the global spotlight due to its unique cultural norms and legal systems. One of the most controversial aspects is the male guardianship system. This system has significant implications on women's rights. It dictates that every woman, regardless of her age, must have a male guardian, typically a father, brother, husband, or son, who has the authority to make critical decisions on her behalf. This includes traveling, getting an education, or even receiving health care. Now, you might think that this is an infringement on women's rights. From a Western perspective, it certainly seems so. But it's important to remember the concept of relativism here. For many within the society, this system is not seen as oppressive, but as a means of protection and honor. However, it's worth noting that things are changing. Recent reforms have allowed women to travel without a guardian's consent, attend public events, and even drive, a right that was denied to them until 2018. These changes have been hailed as a step forward for women's rights in the region. Yet, the pace and extent of these changes are also subject to relativistic interpretations. For some, these changes are groundbreaking. For others, they're seen as too slow, or merely surface-level reforms. This case study demonstrates how cultural norms and legal systems can greatly influence the status and rights of women, and how these can be subject to relativistic interpretations. It underscores the importance of perspective in understanding and evaluating societal norms and changes. For our final case study, let's discuss a globally prevalent issue: child marriage. This practice involves the marriage of a child, often a girl, before reaching the age of 18. From a global human rights perspective, child marriage is seen as a violation. It often leads to detrimental effects such as the end of formal education, early pregnancies, and increased health risks. However, in some societies, child marriage is justified through cultural relativism. It is seen as a way to ensure economic stability, protect family honor, or follow religious beliefs and traditions. This practice is deeply ingrained in the societal fabric and is not perceived as harmful by those who practice it. However, the consequences of child marriage on the child's physical and mental health, education, and overall development cannot be overlooked. Herein lies the challenge. While we must respect cultural practices and beliefs, there's a pressing need to strike a balance with upholding universally accepted human rights. This case study highlights the complex interplay between cultural relativism and human rights, demonstrating how deeply ingrained practices can conflict with globally accepted norms. It also serves as a reminder that cultural relativism can sometimes be used to justify practices that infringe upon human rights, emphasizing the need for careful, nuanced discussions and interventions. So, what have we gleaned from our case studies? From the first study on female genital cutting, we unraveled how culture informs perceptions. Even when the health detriments are known, communities persist in the practice, firm in their belief that the advantages surpass the harms. This is a striking illustration of how cultural relativism can validate practices outsiders might judge harshly. Turning to our second case study, the Western perception of human rights, we discovered that even globally recognized concepts can face relativistic reinterpretation. The idea of human rights, despite universal endorsement, can be questioned and differently understood due to cultural, religious, and regional viewpoints. These case studies have brought us back to the heart of relativism. They underscore that our worldview is not absolute but molded by our experiences, cultural origins, and personal viewpoints. To wrap up, teaches us that our world comprehension is derived from our experiences and viewpoints, and what holds true or right for one may not mirror the same for another. If you enjoyed this video and found it informative, we have a small request. Please consider giving a like to this video. It helps us to understand what content you find valuable, and it also helps other viewers to discover this video. If you want to delve even deeper into topics like this, we strongly encourage you to hit the subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll be notified every time we release a new video so you won't miss a thing. Remember, every like and subscribe helps us bring more content like this to you. So, go ahead and smash that like button, hit subscribe, and join us on this journey to explore and understand the world around us. See you in the next video.